recording. See, Tim Novotny joined us. Just got on. Morning, Tim. Morning, Tim. Good morning, Tim.
I was still connecting the audio, Sensei.
Okay. Are you with us yet, Tim? No audio from you.
Didn't connect the audio yet.
Anyway, let's go. We have two topics initially, and then Thomas had a couple other issues he wanted brought up. Can we hear you yet, Tim? Cannot hear you yet. No audio. But anyway, okay. The two topics we had were one, Ju-Shin, and the person who was interested in that isn't on screen yet, with us yet. So I'm going to put that second, and hopefully Janet will show up by the time we get done with the first. I was going to, the second topic I had was I wanted to work a bit with Darren's side wristlock takedown, because he showed three variations that flowed very well from one into the other. And I was just curious about one thing you did, or one variation, which I used to do it that way until maybe 20 years ago. And then I got some insight and did it differently. It works a lot better. But you're sitting at home, and the statue next to you can't be used as an uke.
Unfortunately, Sensei, Thursday night we had class, and one of the participants in class tested positive for COVID on Friday. We're on quarantine today, so that's the only reason why I don't have any ukes today.
That's perfectly right. I understand completely. We're doing our best here too. It's a unique world. Understatement. Anyway, so I'll try and do as best I can. One of the things I noticed was on one of the side wristlock takedowns you did, the one where you bend the arm and then you press down on top is fine, but there's also let's try Tim again. Are you with us, Tim? It says you're connecting to audio. Are you on?
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, you're good. Okay.
Okay.
So anyway, on that one with the forearm here, are you familiar? There's a nerve up there that you can get that you can press on. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Sensei.
So that was one very small thing. The other thing was when you had him against your chest. Okay, and one of the takedowns you did was you bent over to take him down, and that's the way I was originally taught that technique. I found, however, and this is hard to do without. Okay, let me try and do this standing up. See if it helps any. Just to grab, and the tendency was to grab their wrist and to bend over to get the person to go down. I found that if you keep yourself straight and you bring this down to your chest. So instead of just holding it, bring his hand down sideways, down against your chest, and then just step back. You'll get the same effect a lot faster. And also if if you, camera down. Camera cooperate. No, you're not going to cooperate. Anyway, if you bend over, it tends on any technique, it tends to weaken the technique. And that applies to, I think, any martial art, because you're not balanced. So it's just it's a small thing, but it does make a difference. Okay, we're still waiting for Jack. Go ahead. Does anyone have a comment?
No, not
Thank
yet.
you for the tips, Sensei. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
I'll certainly work on those applications.
Yeah. I mean, it's a small thing. I mean, Seki taught certain techniques a certain way, and I know all of us have had sensei that taught the technique a certain way. And how do you say, if you talk to enough people, you tend to find other ways of doing things, and sometimes they're better, sometimes they're not. But I think that's one of the nice things that, how do you say, getting out of your shell. and you tend to learn more, and it can change how you execute techniques. Seki used to teach a hand throw with a big arc. And it took me years to realize the reason he was showing that big arc and doing the hand throw was he was trying to show how to move the body. But then I watched Wally J do it one day. And it was like, and the technique looked so much better. It was a lot less effort. So anyway, it's if you have an open mind, you learn more, I think. Even though,
Sensei, if it would help, if you want to pull up that video to reference as you talk through it, you can.
from the last time, I'm not
From
that.
the one with the hand techniques on
Yeah,
it.
I'm not that physically. I am not that technologically adept to pull that up and insert it here. So it's
Okay.
yeah, but anyway, so I think we were all here last time anyway, so I think we can all recall it. Okay, Thomas, since Janet's not here yet, we aren't going to do Ju-Shin yet. So what were your couple things?
I this week reading through your book Jujitsu Toward One Technique, and in the early chapter you talk about the role of isolated and integrated technique as a way to teach, as a way to learn through repetition. And so my question is twofold. One, could you talk about isolated versus integrated techniques a bit in terms of setting up a curriculum? And then there's a footnote where you talk about Sensei Seki as students became senior, he would begin to verbally push their buttons with the hope of finding out, can they handle this stuff or not? And if they didn't, he would lose a senior belt. So I was intrigued. I'm a big footnote reader in books. And so I thought, oh, that was worth the price of the book right there, just that story. So if you could talk about those two things, yeah, I would appreciate it.
Isolated technique is if you are essentially just practicing one technique on its own. You're not dealing with blocks, deflections. You're trying to get the student to learn, I say, for lack of a better phrase, a certain set of movements. Okay. Let's say a hand throw. Okay. So you teach that technique, and the goal in doing that is eventually over a number of months, probably, they will get that pattern down in their brain. So it's automatic memory. when you start integrating techniques is when you put it together with other techniques. And as Darren had demonstrated a couple, 3-4 weeks ago, of going from one technique into another. Just a second, I have a dog here. Bear with me. She only comes to me when she has to go outside to do her duty.
That'd be a good thing.
And she's an older lady, suffers from incontinence. And if I don't move fast, I get to clean it up. Bear with me.
Tim, where are you located?
I'm in North Seattle.
Okay. Are you experiencing winter up there yet?
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, it's mostly been cloudy, a little cold.
She's deaf. She's got arthritis. We don't know how much longer she will last, but she's a good dog. Anyway, integrated is, as Darren demonstrated, I think a couple, 3 meetings ago, is when it's somewhat like the Ju-Shin concept. You move from one technique into another, and if one thing doesn't, once they have this pattern down, they know how the technique works. They can then say, well, I'm at this point, the technique isn't working. I can move to another technique. And it's sort of like trying to develop your flow. Because out on the street, first technique, well, I won't say first technique rarely works, but if first technique doesn't work, you've got to be able to go into something else right away. Okay. And so you want to be able to integrate that one technique with other techniques. Part of it is you can train yourself to go through a certain number of, 3 or 4 techniques, but you don't want to, how do you say, you don't want to lockstep yourself so that you have to go through this particular sequence, so that you need to maybe practice things in random orders, because that's good exercise for the brain, and it makes it possible for you to just simply react. I've seen, how do you say it? There are some systems of jujitsu where they have, I guess it's called Kimino Kata tournaments. Everything's the Tori knows what he's doing, the Uke knows what's going to happen. They cooperate with each other 100%. They look beautiful. But you put them in what's more of a randori situation, and they can't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. And I've decades ago, we had a dojo that wanted to come to the AJA, and we require a demo video from anyone, just going through freestyle attacks, nothing planned. They choreographed this thing so well, and they had a drum music in the background to go along with it. But it became painfully obvious that the Uke was so in tune with what was happening that he would go into the technique before the Tori did the technique. And we told him that, no, this is not going to work. But anyway, so.
Sensei.
Yes.
To add to some of that, on some of the drills that we practice with in class, is we tend to stay more on the randori side. I don't typically do the choreograph practice, but we do a lot of randori. And then even in randori, and even switching from or transitioning from one technique to another, a lot of students, or just about everyone for that matter, get used to performing what might be their favorite technique.
Yes.
So even in randori, when they're going over and over and over, you see them perform that same techniques multiple times.
Right.
So in the mix of them actually performing randori, I'll take that technique away to help them have to choose something else to be able to defend themselves on an attack that they don't have a clue what's coming. So
that's good.
It seems to work pretty well.
Right. And counter for the Uke, if you get better, uke that are familiar enough with techniques, they can make, how to say, the Tory gets a better feel for how the technique works when it's done properly, and that sets in his brain too. So that when he's out on the street, he can respond more quickly if he senses that something is awry. Because I know a lot of new students will say, well, how will I know if the technique's working? And when I say to them, well, you feel it. And it confuses them. They say, what do you mean by feel? I said, well, it's not visual, because if you're doing the technique correctly, you're looking at where you're going, not at the technique. You're not watching what your hands do and where your body's moving. You're looking in the direction you want to go, because that's how you direct your ki. And once they get over that hump, which they usually get to around purple belt, their learning increases and they begin to understand what feel means. Because, and I'm sure if any of you have ever had to use this, you know that you have to be sensitive to what the other person, how they're moving, because that determines what you do. Anyway, I think that we get off the track here too much. But anyway, what integrated practice does, and I think Darren's idea of just taking their favorite technique away, what integrated practice does is it forces them to subconsciously move from one technique to another without thinking about it. Because in the street, you don't have time to think about it. Does that address?
It does. And thank you. What I wrestle with is when I first started training in martial arts, and then when Jiu-Jitsu came a few years later, it's always been from day one 100% scenario based.
Right.
So it was a fundamentally self-defense oriented. And what I found over the years, and I'm seeing it especially with my students, my younger 10, 12, 14-year-old students, is I'm not sure that I'm doing them any good service at this point by doing integrated as the basic way I'm doing teaching, because what I see is, and this may be very unique to my situation, they respond to round punch with an appropriate movement that results in a taiyatoshi. And I look and say, there are so many individual elements in there that really need to be brought out and focused on. But in their mind, they say, oh, I did the self-defense technique, and something clicks that I don't want to click just yet. And so it's the old, how much time do I spend on Kihon versus are we going to go right to Goshin Waza type thing. And so when I was reading that chapter, it brought all that fresh to me. That does help. Yes, sir.
I do try to, when I teach, I do a lot of isolated practice. It's about half the class. And because they need, that way I can see if they are learning that particular technique correctly, even if it's review. Okay. And I can go around and, correct their body position or where their hands are or whatnot. And I think that's really important. But towards the end of the class, and we'll actually start this with brand new students about the third week. And we call it deer in the headlight practice. And we'll even have new students that are only, 3 weeks wet with an upper belt. And, we line several teams up on the mat, and their back will be to me, and I'll show an attack, and the person who's facing me, their partner, their uke, will attack them with it. And their technical performance, particularly for new students, sucks. It's okay. They do get better as they learn more techniques, but what's important is I try to stress them, you have got to react, you've got to block, you've got to deflect, you've got to do something. because that's what the attacker is counting on to win, to overpower you. So you're gonna stand there like a deer in the headlights. I do not know what a deer in the headlight means.
It does not.
Cruise.
You just stand there looking dumbfounded when someone's attacking you. And that gives the attacker a couple seconds to get to you. And I started doing that a couple decades ago because I found there were, again, some systems of jujitsu that teach purely kata until the person gets to black belt, and only at that point do they start teaching self-defense. And Seki taught everything for street attacks, so I come from probably the same place Thomas is, everything was, you have an attack, this is how you deal with it. But anyway, so that's where the integrated part comes in, because if they, particularly a new student, if they block and they look a little confused, I'll say, try this, what we taught that night, try that. And that slowly starts to click with them. They need that support, but you've got to get them over that deer in the headlight hump, for lack of a better phrase.
Sensei, I also do a lot of static instruction to kind of critique as they're going along. And TJ, I agree with you on what you were talking about. I get the various levels. I get the deer in the headlight from inexperienced people when they first start, and we throw them in when they're not expecting it, as they just started classes, or even relatively a short period of time in training, to even advanced students when they're just not focused, and you see an attack coming and they're not expecting it, but you could tell that they actually want to do a different technique, because that's what they're hoping the attack that's coming to them allows them to do. So then they're not executing correctly. So you have to address those issues as well. So yeah, I think that those drills certainly help individuals, whether it be beginner, intermediate, or advanced, continue to perform at a higher level.
Yeah, which is also why the beginning of class, I have like about 10 minutes of, we have students out there in teams, and give them, you're going to have, each team's going to have 1 minute you're Tori, the next minute you're Uke. And it gives me a chance to watch the class, and sometimes I'll find issues that they're having. That then becomes part of the class instruction, is to solve some of those problems, rather than, I have my quote unquote plan for the class, but and I just learned this from teaching public school. You can have your lesson plan hunky-dory, but then 35 students walk in, and the plan goes in the trash because other stuff has happened, and then you got to save it for the next day. So sometimes that's, and the same thing at the end, the deer in the headlight practice is, it then maybe it gives me ideas of, this is what I need to do in the next class or next week to resolve that problem without identifying the student who screwed up. So you get, how do you say, as an instructor, by watching this and by watching your students, on anything, you learn, okay, maybe I need to reteach this, or we need to focus on this next week. And it's how do you say, it's not the, how do you say, best planned way of teaching, but when I taught junior high, first time I ever kicked a kid out of homeroom, and his father turned out to be actually a professional counselor, best parent conference ever had. But his wife was, got to be really good friends with the family. And his wife had a really common saying, stuff didn't go well, and it was simply, shit happens. It just became a, things go awry, plan doesn't work, it happens, so. And you have to adjust. But anyway, okay. As far as Seki is concerned, he had a tendency to harass students, and he did not wait until you were in black belt to harass you. The higher you went in rank, the more he verbally harassed you. there was one lady, and she came in, and she was just I don't know, she should not have been there. She was, I mean, she was probably in her mid-40s, and I don't know what she was expecting. I have never seen a student get worse in a class. She was the exception. And he was trying, he took verbal harassment, didn't work with her. So he finally awarded her when belts, at the end of, he awarded belts whenever he felt like it. Because there's no testing and no set criteria. He awarded her a pink belt.
Pink.
Now, if he did that today, he would have been sued for sexual harassment, among other things. But this is the 60s. It took her a couple of weeks to figure out what the belt represented. And he left. But he did harass because he felt, and the higher you went in rank, the more he harassed you, because he felt if you got upset with people, with what people said to you, you had no business learning a martial art, particularly Jiu-Jitsu, because everything ultimately was designed to injure the attacker. And he lost a lot of his upper belts that way. He would tell us that's what he made, he said, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. And he, how do you say? I don't know how to put it. I allowed a lot of this, I allowed the stuff to go in one ear and out the other, which is what he was after, which unfortunately gets a lot of people upset with me because it's very hard to get me upset. So I think it was damaging to him to some extent. I mean, he lost probably half his black belts, 2/3 of the black belts because of that. And if he found you making it, he'd keep picking on you for 2 or 3 weeks. And I understood what he was doing and why he was doing it. And so I just said, okay, he's going to say this and just have to let it go. That's why I understood why he was doing it. When I dislocated my elbow, because the first time I taught a class for him, and a 10-year-old kid dislocated my elbow because I wanted to see what would happen, because the kid had it set correctly and I decided to resist. And that was a learning experience for me. The kid was more upset than I was. But Seki, every time I came to class for 2-3 months, he'd spend 2-3 minutes just chewing me out for that. But that was his, I knew why he was doing it. I said, and it's, I don't think you can get away doing that today. I don't think people will put up with it. I mean, I think it's kind of sad, but at least not in this country, people won't put up with it. Yes, Lonnie.
It's like I started in New York back in 1970
Hmm.
in the Goju karate, and they were merciless on the students, just merciless. And I didn't last long in that discipline, and I moved to judo. But you said the harassment of students. A lot of folks back then, they took it because that was the route, calluses on your knuckles and all that kind of craziness, slapping the back of your calves with the cane. But everybody's not good for it. And you're right. Now this would be harassment, a lawsuit against somebody.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think part of the reason we were willing to take it back then is because the instructors were usually Asian. They were either from another country. And so you kind of assumed, okay, that's the way it is. This is what I have to put up with if I'm going to stick with it. Seki would, just to make sure all the males were wearing cups, he would occasionally just line everybody up. He'd get on a hand bow and do a quick tap up on everyone, and everyone wore a cup. That was, you can't do that today. I mean, his intentions were good, and I think that's what allowed him to continue. If you understood him and the martial arts per se, the intentions were good, and that's I think why we put up with some of that behavior that instructors can't get away with today. It's just a different world.
Mhm.
So, yeah, but he was verbally abusive, and he lost a lot of people because of that. But he ran classes 4 nights a week for $1.25 a month at a junior college, and he always had a waiting list. Classes were 40 people plus, and with that many people, you learn to if you want to get the instruction, you learn to go with the flow, so to speak. So, okay.
Professor Kirby, just on that, if I might, I enjoyed, and I don't know how many of my colleagues here have seen the historical videos that you have through the Hightail account where you can actually see Sensei Seki in class. That's fascinating. I watched that, and I saw the one where you're in, it looks like a mall doing a presentation.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah.
we're at, we had been doing demos for Nisei Week in Little Tokyo in LA for years, because they could not find a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu dojo. So they came to us and we did demos for you. It's not, and then they built a mall, and we did the mall thing. And that was the last year we were there, and they apologized to us after, as the next year came up, they called us and said, we'd really like to have you, but the board has decided they only want to have Japanese martial artists.
Mm.
And, it went by the wayside. One of the funny stories from at that mall was there was a little old lady sitting up towards the front. And during the demo, she asked me, she says, "Why are those people down the hall doing ukemi from one door entrance to the next?" And I looked, because I hadn't noticed them before. I looked over there and I said, they're ninja trying to sneak in. They were the next demo group. Okay. She comes up with the best line and says, "They're not doing a very good job, are they?" Yeah. So anyhow, yeah. Yeah, but we used to do their jujitsu demos for them, and they were very nice. But I guess they just decided they wanted to have a Japanese group do it, and I don't know if they ever found one.
Mm.
So, okay, Janet isn't here yet, but what I want to do is spend a little more time. We spent some time with Ju-Shin a couple sessions ago. And Darren was able to do a kind of a demo of Ju-Shin to some extent. And in case you're not familiar, Tim, it's just basically going through Jujitsu moves. It's an exercise much like Tai Chi, except it's based on Jujitsu techniques.
I see, sir.
And so essentially, and I'll do a quickie routine here as I added my way through this, but this is something you could do with If you wanted to develop, once we get over COVID, as an additional revenue source, is you could start an exercise class of Ju-Shin for non-martial artists. And it's basically, for example, and the idea is always to be balanced. It's good it's a good stretching exercise. It's good movement exercise. For example, if a person's coming in for a hit, you do a double block across. Okay, and this is hard to do with this background here. And then you grab the hand and you come back into a hand throw, and you get to this point and you reach over, come around, make it a wrist lock takedown. You're doing the footwork as well. So now you're in a hand throw, wrist lock takedown, and then let go with your left hand, step back in, you move in for an elbow roll takedown, coming down. Then you come back, you can do a hand throw again. Then you can pull the elbow in towards you and go back in for a shoulder lock or a takedown, okay? And then step back into your ready position, okay? And you're basically doing, going through a routine of 6 to 10 Jiu-Jitsu Aikido techniques, okay? I think this is basically limited to Jiu-Jitsu and Aikido. You really won't find too much in terms of judo throws in this. I haven't really found a way to integrate them well. You could put some practice, strikes in if you wanted to, for the fun of it. But if you would like to develop a routine of 6 to 10 movements, and just write the names of the techniques down and then send me a video of you doing them. I mean, once you get the concept, this becomes something that's dirt simple to teach. You do have to teach each movement separately, isolated moves, okay? And then you can put them together. So now you've got your integrated moves. You didn't realize this was going to segue so well, did you, Thomas? Neither did I. But anyway, so you teach it the same way as you teach anything else. And it may, you can either just have a free exercise class for your students or their parents or whatnots, or you can set it up as another revenue source. I can issue a certificate that says you've successfully participated in an instructor training program. They won't say you're a certified instructor because there's a liability involved there. In case someone falls over and breaks an arm, then they decide to sue you and you sue me. But it would at least have something on the wall for you that says, theoretically know what you're doing. So it's just it's a concept I've kind of played with for the last few years. Years ago, I used to do in between sessions, I do it for either the kids' parents, or I'd say minimum age is age 18. And I would do a session on self-relaxation, because it initially involves 2 people, but then once you do the initial process, you can get yourself to relax. And I used to do that for free. I even did it with the junior high kids one year, and they thought it was great. So there are things you can do outside of quote unquote jiu-jitsu training that let students know that you have, you think about other things too in life. So it's just something to consider. Like I said, if you want to do it, this is when I go on walks, I will actually practice jiu-jitsu techniques as I'm walking. And some people, because a lot of people up here go on walks with their dogs or by themselves or with their spouse. They kind of look at me as I'm walking along, making all these weird moves. I guess their attitude is, he's not hurting you. As long as we leave him alone, we're okay. But anyway, okay, do we have anything else we can want to dig into today, or?
If I might ask another?
Sure.
One of the things that we do in the academy where I teach is on the path to black belt, students will learn the Kihon and a basic kata in either the Jo or the Tanjo or the Tanto. And so here's my question. What are your thoughts on integrating some basic weapon instruction into jujitsu? And I'm doing it primarily to get them working a different part of their brain. Briefly, it's a short approach and they learn just the basics. I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Okay. I'm not teaching a weapon just as a weapon. What I do, and it's kind of based on the way, again, way Seki taught, he had what was called the empty hand concept, is that you should be able to pick up anything that's lying around, even the statue that's Sidarin, and use it as an extension of an empty hand technique. Now, an empty hand technique may simply be, like walking to the right. If you have a cane in your hand, it's the same movement to deflect. And so what I do, though, I require my students when they test 1st through 5th Dan that they also do an empty hand demonstration using any martial arts weapon. I mean, I'll you can do it with Kubotan, flashlight, Hanbo, Jo, Jute. I haven't taught. I mean, I'm somewhat okay with nunchuck in terms of entangling, and because that's what Hal Grosh has taught, was how to entangle a person with the nunchuck until it became felony possession in California. Then he stopped teaching it. But I look at it as they have to show where they, up here, pick up a ballpoint pen. What can you do with the ball? Show me what you can do with the ballpoint pen based upon what your martial arts background instruction is. Use it for nerve attacks. Okay. You can use it for wrist lock. Okay. You can use it for coming around behind a person's back, and if you want, it's gonna be kind of hard to choke them, but there are things you can do with almost any inanimate object. Last 2 years ago, when I was in Arlington, Virginia, we did a session on, and I brought a bunch of kitchen tools with me in my suitcase, and we spent a session on defending yourself with household items, spoon, cooking spoons, spatulas. I didn't bring any butcher knives, but it's they need to realize, part of their learning is that you should be able to pick up almost anything, and if they have a good background, if they know their techniques, they can integrate their what's called techniques into the use of a weapon. And now the alternative, we also have that for one of those 5, they has to have have taken the gun safety course. And the reason I require that we have, we have plastic guns, we have wood guns, we have rubber guns. But if you've ever handled a real gun or had to deal with the other end of a real gun, it's a whole different ball game. And most people have absolutely no idea what a gun sounds like, what it feels like when it's fired, the whole, all of. I'm not advocating gun ownership, and most places that offer gun safety courses do not require that, at least in California, do not require that you have your own handgun. They will provide you with one in the class, but just to have the feel with it, because if you have to defend yourself against a real gun, you have to be careful. The real guns have sharp edges. They're metal. I've had a firing pin caught in my little finger once. It hurt like hell. It was bloody, but the gun didn't fire. No, it didn't have anything in it, but no rounds in it. But they need to just have the awareness of what a gun can do, and it changes their perception. It's the difference between training with a rubber knife and training with a real knife, even if the blade is completely dulled. And I used to train, and I still will. If I do a demo, I will use a real knife with a dulled blade. I don't tell the audience it's dull until it's over, but it changes. It really changes your perception of what you're dealing with. I don't use rubber knives, period. I use wooden knives because rubber knives, they break after a couple weeks, and they're just as expensive as the wooden knives. So that's, that's just from experience. But yeah, I think, I do think having the ability to use any type of martial arts weapon is a worthwhile requirement for someone who's going for black belt or a higher rank. Because I think you have to be able to, apply your knowledge to other situations.
Okay, thank
I
you.
mean, Lonnie, could you use that bookshelf as a self-defense weapon?
I think it's going to fall over because there's too many books in it.
The books would work good too. What would you do with the shelf? With the book?
I get behind it.
Or you would, I'm going to push you on this. What would you do with it? Is it being held up with, you're not in California, are you? No. So you don't have earthquake straps on it, do you?
No.
Everything in our house has earthquake straps. Everything. You don't pull anything. Okay. If you could just simply pull it over and make it a barrier so the attacker can't get to you. It's just simple things.
Yeah.
Darren's sitting next to that vase of decorative dead flowers. I mean, he could pick them up at any time and use them, or he can take them as a group, okay, and use them as a real distraction, okay. You have to, it's just an awareness of using what's around you. And I think that's an important skill for a black belt to have. But it doesn't mean you have to be paranoid about it.
I think popularity-wise, the Arnie stick seems to be has gained some popularity in our culture.
The game of what?
The Arnie stick, the rattan.
Yeah.
So, people are, well, not people, a lot of senseis seem to be incorporating certain elements of Arnis into self-defense.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like this myself. I don't teach all of the fancy stuff, but just the basics and how to block a number 1, number 2, the 5 to the belly, but they're also saying that the stick is an extension of the hand.
Right.
So the same block that I do with the stick or attack, I could do with the hand and backhand, and or the knife. So So that, from an integrated standpoint, again, it's just being able to, talk about how you use it in different contexts as an extension of the hand.
Right. I like your phrase extension of the hand, because sometimes when I say empty hand, people don't connect what it means. But if you see, when we say extension of the hand, that's exactly what I'm referring to. The whatever you have in your hand, the weapon is an extension of your hand. It's an extension of your technique. And thank you.
Thank you.
Different way of phrasing it. Thank you. So, okay. Okay, next. Okay, our next meeting is theoretically scheduled for the 19th, which is getting close to Christmas. Just to let you know. January, we should be okay. Towards the end of January 28th, I'm scheduled to have right shoulder replacement, which is going to make the workshop on first week in January probably unrealistic. That's assuming I'm home. Theoretically, I should be home, but I don't know what mood I'll be in. So just to give you heads up of what's happening. Of course, the way things are going, I have a very strong suspicion that my surgery will be postponed again because of COVID, but who knows? So that's just, to let you know ahead of time. So if you have any topics you'd like covered, and let me know ahead of time, or even, Thomas let me know before, I was on a few minutes ago. He said, can we discuss this? I said, sure. So, and Darren, I hope everyone turns out to be okay. I hope the student who tested positive doesn't have any further complications. And
Thank you.
what I want to clear back into March and April, this is one of the things that came up way back then. And I have it, if you get coldies, it's a cold medicine, or Zyrcam, the first sign of a cold or sniffles, it is, I mean, it's actually proven, both those are proven to cut down the length of a cold by almost half. But it may have some benefit for those who have come down with COVID as well. They don't know for sure. No one really pursued it that much further, but it's, it can't hurt. And if they think they do have COVID, they need to get medical care, because early medical care is the key to surviving better. So I hope he's okay. I hope no one else comes down is positive. Anyhow, because I've lost 2 people to that already, and that's not relatives, but one was one of my younger jiu-jitsu students in his early 20s, and it does, I mean, I've lost, as a school teacher, I lost 3 or 4 kids. And I say, for lack of a better phrase, they're part of family, and it does hurt. So I hope, I sincerely hope he's okay, and I hope no one else comes down with it. For any of you, I just, don't wish it. Be good, be safe, wear a mask, stay home. In California, they're even saying now, if someone in your house has it, you need to wear a mask inside. They're LA County, they haven't shut it down yet. They haven't done the stay-at-home order yet, but everyone figures it's coming. So anyway, it's a bummer. So on a happier note, I hope
vaccine's on the way.
On a happier note, I hope you all got your lists into Santa Claus. Rudolph is even wearing a mask, which is going to make it difficult for Santa this year. But I hope Santa fulfills all your wishes. And happy Hanukkah for those of you who are Jewish, and see who's left who has a holiday coming up. Kwanzaa, there's
Feast of the Epiphany, was it the Three Kings?
pardon?
Three Kings, that's,
Three Kings. Yeah, so you know, it's we have a multicultural nation, and got to learn to respect everyone. So anyhow, I hope you have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week. I have to evaluate a couple belt exams, so I don't know if I'll be able to get this put together and out on YouTube today, but I will let you know as soon as it's up and running. And I want to thank you very much for the good questions. And Tim, hopefully you got something out of this. And
Yeah,
next,
it's great to hear. Next week on the 19th, I'll be going out of town, so I'm not sure if I can make it or not. Next week's class.
okay. No, it's a workshop, and if you have questions, you ask them.
Mhm.
And or if you have if one additional thing I thought of is that if you have a but you need an uke for this. If you have a core technique, okay, or basic technique, and then 2 or 3 variations of it, as Darren demonstrated 2 weeks ago, that you would like to demonstrate, we need to maybe do some of that as well, because others of us may have additional variations of that technique or different ways of doing it. And I think part of the purpose of this is to share ideas. And I think if you look at the martial arts, no technique is set in stone. And they're viewed, as I tell my students, there are very few techniques in Jiu-Jitsu that can be done only one way. And I think out of all the 800 or so variations that I've learned, there are 2, 3 techniques that can only be done one way. But I think that's the exception more than the rule. And I think if we can exchange ideas and find different ways of doing the techniques, then you can choose for yourself. I've learned from doing this that different ways of doing some techniques. And that's also what I want to mention, Darren. When you did the side wristlock takedown and you interlocked between the fingers, I had never seen that before done that way. I had seen it done for the LAPD in the arm lock, because they're having female officers and officers with smaller hands, rather than doing the arm lock where you do a wrist press this way. They simply flip it around and grab 2 or 3 fingers and bend the hand backwards. And that works for people with smaller hands or officers. All you need is 2 fingers. And it works beautifully. But it's the little things that if we can pick up on from each other, that we probably can really expand our understanding. So I want to thank you for that too, Darren.
You're welcome.
My attitude is, if I run a seminar or something and I don't learn something, the seminar has been a failure as far as I've been concerned. So, because that's my approach. You're not the sole purveyor of wisdom, or I'm not the sole purveyor of wisdom. Anyway, have a good weekend. See you in 2 weeks on the 19th. If any of you are dressing up as Santa, you can dress up as Santa for the workshop. And
Thank you, Sensei. We always learn a lot.
Take care.
Thank you, Sensei.
well, use your Santa bag as a weapon. Your bag. Okay, take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
have